Hey kids, it's Minecraft Monday again. So last time we talked about the lore of our Minecraft world, and I showed this timeline of the server where we covered a brief history from the beginning of the second era till the present. That video did extremely well, so today we have the next installment. This video will reference some information covered in the previous one, but you don't necessarily have to have seen the first one to understand. Nonetheless, I of course recommend that you go watch that one as well, either before this video or after. It doesn't really matter. Now, I don't feel like quite enough has happened in the server yet to make a second video on current events, so today we'll just go back and talk about the history of the first era. Before we get started, there are some important disclaimers that we have to go over. As stated in the Part 1 overview, only 2 players from the first era are still alive, so they are effectively our only source of information for this history video. Additionally, the first era spanned a long amount of time, at least a year and a half of real-world time. So even then, some of the details that those 2 players have provided are hearsay or secondhand even to them. There are very few screenshots from this time, and nobody knows where in the world any of this happened. Even the people who were part of it, due to various reasons such as coordinates were off and all new players were led or teleported to where everybody was at the time. Here's what we do know. The clustered civilizations of the ancient times were at least 6,000 blocks from the world spawn, and the founder traveled far and wide to find the right spot to build. Again, the amount of screenshots or imagery that we have from this time is very, very limited, and as such, I have to apologize in advance that I'll probably just use a lot of hand-drawn illustrations in this video, so sorry for the lack of Minecraft imagery in this Minecraft content, but that's just the way it is when we're dealing with what is essentially ancient history. So with that out of the way, let's begin. This is the history of the first era. In the beginning, the realm was founded by a player named Diaz, along with his girlfriend KC, and another player named Riptide. They settled initially along the western shore of a great ocean after spending many a night traveling looking for the perfect spot to set up. Most of the coastline region where they settled consisted of old-growth spruce forest, where Diaz began a settlement away from the shore, and KC and Riptide spent their time exploring the wider world and collecting resources. After some time, 2 more players, Abdul and Lemon, joined the trio along the coastline. Lemon, Abdul, and KC came together to found a new settlement on a peninsula to the south, with Lemon as their leader. From her adventures, Casey brought in novel items from far away, such as special tree saplings and flowers. With these, she started her acacia gardens on the north of the peninsula, a symbol of the new civilization's exploratory feats. Soon after that, several construction projects began, and Lemon named his new settlement Agrios. Abdul lived in a modest wooden house on the north of the peninsula, expanding the gardens and farms. Casey traveled slightly farther south along the coast, building a beautiful cottage and barn with expansive terraced farms that supplied most of the civilized world's food. Abdul spent most of his time mining out a tunnel network beneath the farms and ocean. On the southern tip of the peninsula, Lemon used sand and glass to extend the land upon which he built his castle, using dyed concrete, terracotta, and colored wools to create a vibrantly colored fortress, with a trade hall and expansive interior courtyard equipped with a beacon to showcase his power. This is a mock-up that Flooded and Zippers made of Lemon's castle in creative mode, but they've both since agreed that it's a fairly pathetic attempt at recreating the original castle, which they claim was at least 4 times the size of this one. A rival in size even for the Emir's Palace of the Emirate today. Again, with no screenshots or game clips of any kind, the grandeur of the original fortress exists now only in memory. It was at this point that Lemon declared himself the king of Agrios and solidified his civilization as the most powerful in the world. Although everything remained peaceful with the founder, Diaz, who spent most of his days building a mansion in the forest with no real desire for power. As we might expect, the Agriosan sigil and banner bore lemon-themed imagery. In fact, within Zipper's own personal quarters, he keeps a banner bearing the Agriosan sigil, and claims that this is in fact an original and not a reproduction. If that's to be believed, that would mean that this item is the only relic remaining from old Agrios, as this banner would have hung somewhere in or around Lemon's castle, making it an item of great importance, being in fact the only item saved from the First Era. Why Zippers kept such a relic is unknown. Perhaps some sort of sentimentality or nostalgia for times long past, although it is curious nonetheless, as we know that King Lemon and Zippers didn't exactly get along, but clearly either the sigil or Old Agrios itself has had an influence over Zippers and Flooded alike. When we compare the Agriosan banner and the banner of the newly formed emirate, we can see that they are strikingly similar, and it is more likely than not that Zippers based part of his design for the All-Seeing Eye off of the Old Agrios flag. Again, why he did this, we can't entirely be sure. It seems the significance of the banner among the current players of the server is underplayed. No one really knows that he has it. No one really appreciates its significance. It's not like it's been used as a religious symbol or anything like that. It's kind of just hanging in his personal quarters. Wanting to strike out on his own, Riptide ventured to the north and built a tower at the forest border with a plains biome. Here is where he met two more players, Zippers and Flooded, who are both the future Emir and the future Shogun, respectively. Riptide then brought them south to meet with King Lemon. After the initial meeting, Lemon distrusted Zippers, who returned to the tower along with Riptide and KC. Flooded took up KC's position tending agriculture and farms at Agrios. Another player, whose name is now lost to history, appeared shortly later, but just as quickly disappeared to the northwest. This time marks the first world-altering event, where Lemon and Abdul discovered the existence of another dimension, which they called the Nether, a fiery alien hellscape with far more dangers than the overworld. While Lemon was interested in resources and creatures from the Nether, Flooded discovered the warping of space-time in the dimension, which could, in his theory, allow someone to travel great distances in the overworld using two Nether gates. Through extensive Nether exploration, King Lemon discovered how to summon a creature called the Wither, whose destructive capabilities were unparalleled. This started the king down a deep dive into the Nether's inherent connection with magic, which he believed he could harness and exploit. It is evident that Lemon most likely did succeed in summoning and destroying a Wither, perhaps multiple, but no one was there to witness these events, and these claims cannot be confirmed other than the fact that we know Lemon's keep had a beacon in the courtyard. Over time, Riptide built up the tower and expanded his small settlement, which was separate from Agrios, while Diaz continued to work on the mansion, remaining politically uninvolved. Additionally, Flooded accepted an offer from Zippers to join him at a settlement in the north. Entirely concealed underground, this was known only as the Bunker. Over time, the bunker was expanded into a massive underground complex. With Flooded and Zippers working together to build the bunker, it is consequently the only structure from the old world that we have any imagery of. With everyone settled out, Diaz working on his mansion, Riptide and KC living in the tower, and Lemon and Abdul expanding the might of Agrios, and Flooded and Zippers living in their bunker to the northeast, this could have comfortably remained the status quo for quite some time, if not for one specific catalyst event. After some time, it was somehow discovered that Casey and Riptide had actually fallen for one another, which led to Casey leaving Diaz for Riptide. Again, the only accounts by which I'm basing this are from Flooded and Zippers, who survived the subsequent events by hiding away in the bunker where no one else in the world knew where they were. Therefore, the only story we can piece together of the events that followed are purely speculative. We only have 3 observed death messages from this time. Abdul was slain by Wolf, Diaz burned to death, and Riptide withered away. The only thing we know for certain is that none of the players, other than Zippers and Flooded, were ever seen or heard from again. This mysterious series of events is now called the Fall of Agrios. On their investigation, Flooded and Zippers initially stopped at the ruins of Riptide's tower. Where there had once been waterfalls and an indoor farm was now fresh craters in a flooded cave. Sadly, Flooded's horse, Dog, slipped and fell into one of these flooded tunnels. Although Flooded tried desperately to save him, sadly the horse drowned in the underground catacombs. Shortly thereafter, a funeral was held for Dog before the two continued on toward Old Agrios, only to find Lemon's castle abandoned and in a state of disrepair. Pieces of the towers were missing, walls broken, chests empty. Additionally, the crop fields and cottages that KC had built were badly damaged, along with Diaz's mansion in the woods, which had significant chunks missing. The ultimate fate of most of these players still remains unknown, and while we could go into theories on what exactly happened, we'll have to save that for another time. While exploring the ruins of Agrios, Zippers and Flooded discovered a secret chamber lit with soul torches that led down to an immense hallway underground, large enough to ride a horse through. Additionally, Zippers discovered a secret nether portal deep in the mines. Traveling through the portal into a large nether base, Zippers unknowingly set off a tripwire which destroyed the portal and much of the surrounding structure, ultimately dooming Zippers to fall, but he miraculously survived by landing on a twisted vine. From Flooded's perspective, Zippers merely entered the portal and did not return. After Zippers failed to make the rendezvous, Flooded spent some time searching the ruins in an attempt to find him. He eventually did venture through the nether portal, only to find on the other side evidence of a base that had clearly been destroyed. Putting two and two together, Flooded was forced to conclude that Zippers had been killed by a booby trap. Returning to the overworld, Flooded collected a few items from the ruins of the castle, and then headed for the stables, where he took one of Lemon's purebred white horses, which he named Dog 2, and rode off back toward the bunker. This marks the end of the First Era and the beginning of the Lost Era, which would eventually come to an end with Zipper's emergence from a nether portal a long time later and many thousands of miles away. As I stated in the previous video, the exact duration of the Lost Era is not entirely known, and what Zippers and Flooded were up to during this time period is mostly a mystery. All we know is that eventually, Zippers did re-emerge and founded the new heart of civilization with what is now known as the Emirate. Flooded would later arrive by sea, where he founded the Shogunate with Zipper's help, after reconnecting with his lost ally. At the peak of its power, Agrios was unrivaled. While most of what went on behind the walls of the castle is unknown, it is highly likely that Lemon was dabbling in all kinds of different magical experimentation. We know for certain that King Lemon was the first to forge a sword out of diamonds and apply magical enchantments to it. While magic and alchemy are just starting to come back in the New World, one can only dream of what magical knowledge was lost with the fall of Agrios. And that concludes our history of the First Era. This is all the information we have, but it leaves many questions unanswered. While we do have those 3 death messages, what exactly happened at the fall of Agrios is unclear. And even with the death messages, the ultimate fate of all the players involved is unknown. In the future, we'll do a deep dive into the fall of Agrios, and we'll go over multiple theories and speculations about what could have possibly happened that day. Until then, this has been part 2 of our new ongoing lore series, which I've decided to call A Song of Blocks and Blood. Just like me, I'm sure you can't wait to find out what's going to happen next, so be sure to tune in next time for an update on the world. And again, thank you so much for watching, and until next time.